Okay. Welcome everyone. This is one of the first events of the week for Earth Week, called Making Your Message Heard. My name's Kara, and I'm one of the executive board members of CLEAN, and I'm joined by my fellow executive board members, Marina, Sam, Brooke, and Carissa. So we'll get started here. If you could please keep your microphones muted while we're presenting. You can find those controls at the bottom of your screen. And feel free to ask questions throughout. You can either type in the chat on the left-hand side or raise your hand on the bottom of the screen, and if you want to use a microphone, that works too. So this event was produced in partnership with the Office of Sustainability. So there's many more interesting events to come this week, so feel free to check out the link for the rest of the events. They're happening all throughout this week. Since Earth Day is this week, we're declaring this to be Earth Week. So yes, I'll tell you a little bit more about CLEAN. CLEAN is a student organization on campus whose goal is to have UW-Madison commit to 100% renewable electricity by 2030 and 100% total renewables by 2050. We're an activist group that uses grassroots techniques, and we'll be telling you a little bit more about how we do that in this presentation. So some of our biggest accomplishments in the last year include hosting a successful climate strike, also working with the Associated Students of Madison to pass a resolution with our goal, and meeting with many other important decision makers such as Chancellor Rebecca Blank, Mayor Satya Rhodes Conway, and also the UW-Madison Director of Sustainability, Missy Nergard. So obviously, it's very important to have activism on college campuses because colleges and universities often lead the way when it comes to activism. There have been many student-led movements in history all around different issues, including civil and human rights, divestment from fossil fuels, and many others. CLEAN is only one of many organizations across the country right now trying to get local colleges and universities to adopt more clean and renewable sources. So our universities are often the leaders and innovators of activism, and also successful activism at the university level can even translate further into communities and all the way into cities. So one example of a large student-led movement surrounding renewable energy is the President's Climate Commitment, which many universities have adopted. I won't go into too much detail, but signing this commitment includes many important steps like going carbon neutral. So in summary, young people are the movement makers. So if there's an issue you're passionate about and you want to change, you are more than capable of doing so. And we'll go ahead and give you some tips about how to get started.
All right, so I'm Carissa, and I'm going to be talking about how to, like, the basics of starting a campaign. So we're going to go through identifying a campaign idea, creating a platform, researching, and then coming up with a message. So identifying a campaign idea. To start any campaign, you need to consider what you're most passionate about. For instance, if you love animals, then maybe you want to raise awareness on animal abuse. Or if you had personal experience with excessively high medical bills, maybe you want to start advocating for universal health care. Just anything that really lights a fire under you. And this is important because you're going to be putting in a lot of time towards the work that you're doing. So if you don't like it and if you don't feel passionate about it, then you're not going to be willing to make the effort that goes into campaigning. Also, other people can see if you're doing something with passion, and they're going to be gravitated towards you and your cause for that reason and get inspired themselves. So that's the most important step in starting a campaign, is finding a cause that you're really passionate about. And we're going to be talking a little bit about this later, just like in brief. So next, you're going to want to make your platform. When you're first starting out, this includes reaching out to your friends who are interested in the same issues, reaching out to other students and majors that may be related to your cause, or other student organizations that may have a similar goal or like-minded people. The campaign can definitely start with one person, but you're going to need others because we're all students besides Nathan, I think. So we have a lot of other stuff going on. Also, having the support will be really important down the line when you may meet roadblocks or get discouraged. And so, yeah, having that support is really important for the longevity of your campaign. I know for Clean, there's been a couple of times where we felt like we were at dead ends after being told no a lot. But then when you have these really passionate, amazing people around you, and you know that the work you're doing is really important, then you get encouraged to keep going. Lastly, to advertise your campaign to a wide audience, it is essential to create a Facebook page so that when you have events, you can make them visible to the public. And then when you achieve all these great things, you can let the public know all the work you're doing, which may lead to them wanting to join you. It is also a good idea to start a website so people can learn more about your campaign in depth. Clean just used the free version of Weebly, so it's pretty easy to make your own website when you have the time. Next, you're going to want to look at what change needs to happen in your campus or community in order to make what you're campaigning for a reality. So these are some of the questions that Clean researched before diving into all of our campaign work. For more general questions, you can do research on if your campus or community is already doing something to address the problem. And if they are, you can join them, and then you can also see how you can help them, or if you feel like they need to improve in some aspect, you can see if you can improve their campaign somehow. You should also research how other places are tackling the problems and learn about other campaigns that are similar to what you want to do. So from these campaigns, you can either weigh like a general framework for what you want your campaign to look like. You could learn different tactics for what they're doing that you want to implement in your campaign, or if they have different chapters, like the Climate Reality Project, and you really like what they're doing and how they're doing it, then you can start your own chapter in like your campus. For more specific questions, you'll want to research who makes the decisions on the changes that you want to make, and then who influences the people making those decisions. This is going to help you narrow down who you want to appeal to. So yeah, it's also important to look at areas like how much this change might cost. For instance, we advocate for implementing renewable energy on campus, which costs a lot of money, because people obviously care about money. So if you're gonna be appealing to them and campaigning, you're gonna want to know like the general amount of money it's gonna cost you. You're also going to want to know how much support there is amongst the students, faculty, staff, and administration. So yeah, a lot of this research you're going to be able to do on the internet, but some of it you may need to book meetings or conduct surveys around campus. And doing this research is especially important because then later when people ask you about your campaign or why they should even care, then you're going to have an answer and a lot of facts to back it up, and they're going to be more likely to support you. But before you can start all of your events and rallying support, you're going to need to come up with a message and a brand. So this is probably going to happen during your research stage or while you're building your platform. And you're going to want the campaign name to be impactful, relevant, and easy to remember. Along with the name, you need to come up with a mission statement, which is the main goal that you're hoping to achieve. This goal can change over time as you learn more, but it's best to start ambitious, in my opinion, because it's always best to ask for the most you can in the beginning and then work your way down. You want the mission statement to be very clear and concise so the decision makers know exactly what you're asking for. And then, so when you're coming up with your message, you're going to want to think about who the decision makers are, which you've hopefully found out from the research stage. And then Marina's going to go a little bit more into that next with power mapping, but it's essential because your message is aiming towards those people, and those are the people you need to convince, so your message needs to get to them. Lastly, to start off the relationship with the decision makers, you should create a campaign launch letter, and this is going to clearly lay out what you're demanding and who you're demanding it from. And so now I'm going to talk a little bit about Clean's story and how we did all of this, so like our start to our campaign. It began in 2017 when 3 students came together from 3 different orgs on campus, and they realized that there was a lack of coordination on campus among environmental orgs on the issue of campus energy usage. And so they were all really passionate about the environment and renewable energy, so they wanted to make a change in that domain. They built their platform by inviting students from all the different environmental orgs to their first meeting, and from there they decided specifically what they wanted their goal to be, which was transitioning the campus to 100% renewable energy by 2030. And then they decided on the name CLEAN, or Campus Leaders for Energy Action Now. And we decided this because it was short and it gave people, short, easy to remember, and it gave people a clue to what our campaign was about before we even talked about it, because it says clean and we're talking about clean energy. And then in the first month, we also came up with our mission statement, and that eventually changed a little bit. So originally we were asking for 100% clean energy by 2030, and then through conversations with administrators, we adapted this statement to say 100% renewable energy by 2050, and then derive all electrical power from renewable resources by 2030. And then throughout all of this process, we were researching everything we could about energy usage on campus, who the decision makers are, and like the questions I was talking about before. And then lastly, instead of doing a campaign launch letter, we did a campaign launch event called Our Time to Shine. And so yeah, that's just an overall example of how we started our campaign and how we followed these different steps to get where we are today.
All right, thanks, Carissa. Yeah, so earlier during the research section of what Carissa was saying, she mentioned trying to decide who your decision maker is, and there's a really useful tool called power mapping, and power mapping is a super effective way to organize your campaign because it does specifically help determine who the decision maker is and what steps you need to take in order to convince that group or that person. So when you're power mapping, first you want to start off with deciding who your decision maker is. This person is going to drive many aspects of your campaign. And for an example, Clean ended up choosing Chandler Blank as our decision maker because she's both the leader of the university and she's also very accessible and willing to work with students, which is usually important when trying to come up with a decision maker. And then once you have that, you can start to look at who influences that decision maker, and that will become your list of influencers. So what you want to do is brainstorm a long list of anyone, any person, or any group of people who you believe have any influence over your decision maker. So for example, Clean, we ended up thinking of like the director of sustainability, ASM, faculty senate, and a lot of people from the administration faculty. So this list can get pretty long at first. And then once you have your list, you can prioritize the groups and people who you think have the most influence over your decision maker. And out of those people, you can then decide who you as students or you as community members have the most power over. And that's where you want to start. And then finally, it is good to identify who your opposition may be. It's just a good thing to be aware of. And by power mapping, we now know who we want to convince and how much convincing they will need. And it is always best to start off with people who kind of support your issue. That way you can kind of build a coalition, they can join your movement, you have a bigger campaign, and then that's when you'll be ready to tackle on maybe those influencers that aren't as keen about what you're doing. So yeah, that is power mapping. Very useful tool. And now, now that you've power mapped, you can finally start planning your campaign strategy, and that's the fun part. An effective way to run a campaign in your community or on campus is with grassroots tactics. And I've kind of put a definition of what like grassroots organizing is, but in general, it is a group of people on the local level trying to affect change, and there's usually little to no hierarchy in grassroots movements, and it's just a very people-powered way to affect change. So that's those are the kinds of tactics that we use for Clean. And these methods have been proven successful throughout countless campaigns. And a good example is plenty of other college campuses across the country who have also been fighting for clean energy. So yeah, really awesome. And so the first thing you need to do before you can start campaign is to start by researching your issue. And Carissa went through researching really well. So as you can see, it is definitely a very important part of running a campaign, because if you're not factual and accurate, then people will not really trust your campaign as much. So it's important to know what you're talking about. And then once you have that new wealth of knowledge, you can then go on to set an ambitious yet realistic goal that you will be campaigning for. And next, you can choose tactics for your campaign based off of that goal. And Sam in the later slides will go through a pretty large list of different grassroots tactics that you can use. And then once you have chosen your tactics, you can then start to set numerical goals for each tactic. Goal setting in general is very important for a campaign, because not only can you refer back to these goals to keep your campaign on track, but they also give you something to work towards. And meeting goals is always a super fun and exciting moment in every campaign. And this is especially helpful if your overall goal is very ambitious, because it can be pretty daunting to for Clean step on to the field with the expectation of transitioning to clean energy. But when you set these smaller numerical goals for your tactics, everything becomes a lot more realistic. The first 1,000 petitions is always a big step towards that overall goal. So yeah, on to Sam talking about tactics.
Thank you, Marina. So I'm Sam. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about specific grassroots tactics that are really helpful when you are organizing your cause. And I would say before we start, I think two important things is that a lot of these tactics are going to serve two general purposes. Generally speaking, they're going to raise awareness for your cause, and they're going to help you gather support for your cause. So first up, we're going to talk about petitioning. Just like the slide says, petitions are a great, fun way to collect support and have a very concrete idea of how many people are actually behind your cause, which is really helpful. There are 3 good reasons listed right here for why petitioning is good, and I'm going to go and do a little bit of detail about each one. So first off, like I mentioned, it's a great way to gather support from your students or your community members, whoever you're trying to reach out to, and it's good to have a concrete knowledge of how many people are actually behind you. It's good for you guys to know as a group how many people are generally supportive of your cause, but it's also good because it can be a powerful label to hand to decision makers when you say this is a number of people that are behind us. Plus, it is just enjoyable sometimes. Sometimes activism can get a little doomy and gloomy. Sometimes you feel like you aren't making as much progress as you do, or your cause isn't going as well as you want it to. And petitioning can be a fun group activity that helps keep morale up and helps remind you. It gives you that classic activist feeling that you really just can't beat. Second, it's great for having one-on-one conversations with community members or other students about your issue, which is good for a couple different reasons. One interesting reason is that it can give you, kind of like Marina and Carissa both mentioned before, it gives you a good idea of where people who might oppose your issue stand. So sometimes when we as Clean have been petitioning in the past, we've come up to people, we've talked to people, we've encountered people who don't agree with our demands, who don't agree with our issue, and it's been really good to know what those people think and how they're thinking about it, both just because it's always good to know who's arguing against you, and also because it helps us learn how we can sometimes sell our issue so that people who wouldn't normally be on our side might be included in our definition of transitioning to clean energy. And also on the flip side of that, you can meet people who are just as like-minded as you and just as excited as you, which is great for morale. And that kind of bleeds into point number 3, which is it helps you recruit new members and volunteers, because when you meet those great like-minded people, a goal should always be to try to get them involved in some way, whether that's as a full-time member or just as a part-time volunteer. Whenever you meet somebody who's as excited about your cause as you are, it's always best to try to get them involved so they can help you out. So next we're going to talk about visibility. Visibility is hugely important for an activism campaign. Anything that you can do to get people talking about your cause and your issue is really important for a couple of reasons. The first of which is that it can have the same effect as the last bullet point about petitioning. It can, if your issue circulates, if people are hearing about your cause, then it might cause like-minded people to want to come support you, join up with you, or at the very least, they might share your cause around even more, so that it eventually gets to the people that you're going to want to recruit. Another important part of visibility is that it can help your campaign actually reach the desk of your decision makers before you ever actually do. We as Clean had some experience with that before some of our original leaders actually went to meet with their decision makers at the time. Those decision makers had heard about our organization before, whether by word of mouth or just through the grape talking to other administrators. And that was huge for us, because it not only does it give us a sense of validation that people are hearing about us and they're talking about us, but it also helps you build credibility with your decision maker before you ever actually meet with them. So on the slide here, there are a couple tactics that you can use to gain visibility, and I'm going to talk a little bit about each one and why they're important. So first up, there's events. When you're planning an event, you can really be doing any of the tactics that are going to lead you towards visibility. So it can be to recruit members, it can be to reach in makers and make a statement, it can be just to reach the community as a whole, or it can just be enjoyable for you and your organization and people who think like you. So events are often a great chance to recruit new members and build support for your issue, no matter whether they're focused on that or not. So it's always important to bring things like your petitions, your flyers, and all your mission statements to events. So when people come and attend, they learn more about who you are and what you're about. And one thing that events are very nice for is that they're adaptable to the goals of your campaign. So whatever you think your campaign is at the moment, you can host an event that'll help you serve that goal. Second, we have tabling. Tabling is generally very similar in purpose to petitioning, but it's slightly more reliable in terms of a recruitment method. Part of this is the fact that when you're tabling versus petitioning, in petitioning you're going to go approach people and try to convince them to support your cause. In tabling, those people are going to come to you. So a lot of the time when tabling, you'll meet people who are like-minded, who are excited about your cause, who are going to approach you and come up to the table with an already vested interest, which is a great chance to recruit new members and build your support base. But also, tabling is just good because it's a good chance to be out in a public place, have a large branded image of your causes and what your organization does, so that you can gather name recognition in the community. So when people mention your organization, it's less who is that and more, oh, I've heard of them. Third up, we have press releases and news stories. For anyone who doesn't know, a press release is an official document that an organization delivers to the media, which can generally serve a couple purposes. Most commonly, it's to make a statement regarding a current event that has happened that's relevant to your group's cause, to announce a new public plan for your group, or to raise awareness for an event or demonstration that's occurring soon. These letters are a great way to get the media's attention and garner their focus towards your organization, especially at times when you're doing things that are important or worth looking at. And it can often result in publishing a news story or some form of official news spread about your group or your cause. News stories are a phenomenal way to gain name recognition because they give a very official tone to what you're working on, and they're a very good way to reach both community members and decision makers in a very official way. We have letters to the editor. There's a little blurb on the slide there, but who doesn't know, a letter to the editor is something that a group writes to a news source. Generally, it's a commentary on something the news source has published in the past, or it's just a commentary on current events and it's designed to be published within that source. Usually a news source will have a specific page dedicated to letters to the editor and commentary about them. These serve a very similar purpose to news stories, except the one thing that they have an advantage on when compared to a news story is that it puts your group more in control of how you frame the issue and how you frame your group's stance on an issue. A letter to the editor is a great chance to talk about an issue that's important to your community and important to your cause, while also plugging your cause and making sure that people know that there are groups working on whatever issue may be. Lastly, we have social media. And social media is interesting in that it's a great way to kind of generally cover the purposes of all of those previous visibility tactics kind of at once. When you get people to follow your social media, you can cover letters to the editor by just posting commentaries on certain events, news stories you can share that are similar to ones that you would have had published about you in the past, and events and tabling. You can spread awareness about your cause, and you can literally add to your events via social media. So it's a great way to get people involved without generally as much time or effort as some of the other tactics may take. Lastly, I'm going to talk to y'all about sign-on letters. So just for a quick explanation, a sign-on letter is when a group makes they draft up their mission statement and they will send it out to organizations. There's a little list here of people that you can commonly send it to. So organizations, faculty, alumni, community businesses, all of those different things. And what it is you send that letter and you ask those people or that person or that business to sign on and say that they officially support your cause. Generally, a sign-on letter does the same thing as a petition. It gives you a concrete statement of support. But what's good about a sign-on letter is that it's not only is it more official in that sometimes you're getting like a big stamp on your cause, but also it gives you the support of a group of individuals all at once instead of having to talk to each person on their own. It's an easy goal to track, and that you can always refresh those sign-on letters. You know exactly how many you have, you know exactly who supports you, and it's a great way to build collaboration within your activism community. Every so often when leadership changes in an organization, you can go back, refresh your relationship with that group by asking them to re-sign on to your letter, and it's a really good tool, not only for gathering support for yourself, but also for coalition building. So we in Clean have taken advantage of all of these grassroots tactics in the past. As Marina and Carissa and Kara were talking before, we've had events, we've tabled. Sign-on letters were actually huge for us in this last year, and that they helped us build relationships that eventually led to us being very involved in planning the climate strike, which is great. So a lot of grassroots tactics have helped us, and when it comes to new budding activism organizations, they can definitely help out you too.
All right. Okay, so earlier we discussed power mapping and kind of figuring out who your decision maker is. And part of that process is also going to be determining who can influence that decision maker. In many cases, especially on college campuses, there's going to be different organizations such as student governments or faculty groups. And these organizations can pass resolutions, which are public statements that can help influence the decision maker. Now, they may not have the actual to enact those demands that you're asking for in the resolution, but their support can be really important in bringing more visibility to your cause, and also just convincing your decision maker who does have that power to take that action. And so last semester, Clean worked with ASM to pass a new resolution adopting our clean energy demands. And this was a really great opportunity because the chancellor definitely saw that resolution and is more likely to be influenced by the student government. But also she can see that students outside of our small organization definitely care about our campaign and also want to see those changes. So it's definitely a great way to further increase your visibility, and also even just increase your validity in the eyes of your decision maker. And finally, we're going finally, we'll wrap up with talking about volunteers and helping to build your team. And so volunteers can be increased for your campaign, and the stronger your team is, the more successful you're going to be. Um, and so you want to make sure that your volunteers stay engaged and really feel like they're a part of the campaign. So don't be afraid to delegate some of the work that you have and really ask them to help with completing projects. This not only helps you stay more on top of things, but it's also going to help them feel like they're more part of the team and more making a difference. And that's going to make them want to stay more involved with the campaign. But also, especially for new volunteers, they may not know everything about your campaign, or they may not have all of the skills that you have established. So you definitely want to be patient and be willing to work alongside them. But one of the things that Clean has found helpful is that we try to hold little workshops to teach our members things like how to write a letter to the editor or how to write a press release. Or there's other things that we talk for the volunteers. It's also important to acknowledge that volunteers are going to have many different personality types, different skills, and different passions. So it's a great idea to meet with your volunteers one-on-one when they're joining the movement and kind of learn what they like to do. And then going forward, make sure that you're giving them tasks and working on projects with them that they actually really enjoy doing. So for example, someone who likes to do data entry might not necessarily like to collect petition signatures. So that's just something you want to consider when you're and finally, we want to always be prioritizing inclusion and equity within the movement. And if you need some ideas for this, I would definitely suggest checking out the Jemez Principles for Democratic Organizing. Many different environmental groups have adopted these principles, and it really helps to make sure all of their participants, coming from different cultures and politics and organizations, all have a common understanding about the group norms and such.
Okay, thank you, Brooke. I think we'll go into